Hello, everybody. This is one and only current date Sony. Today we have a very special guest. Well, he is James Beck. They are first and the oldest student of Sydney Banks, and he's also a coach at Heartfelt Presence. So, with honor and pleasure, let's welcome James Beck. Hi, James. How are you today?
Just fine, Karan. How are you doing?
I'm doing so good. So good to have you here.
It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. James, today I would like to ask you, what are the three principles
Oh
and
my goodness.
how do they work in our life?
Well, that's a biggie. I don't really. The first answer is no. I don't know what they are, but I will make an attempt to think of what comes out when I do it. The three principles are the principles by which all humanity um, experience life. And they have been given names. The names would be mind, consciousness, and thought. So these principles work together. We do not experience life without them. We cannot drop one and just have the other two, and life will be experienced. We need all three of them. They're all three important. You can't have it doesn't work without any of them. Without all three of them. They're really, I suppose, I've heard it described as the most deeply guarded secret. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily guarded, but we don't seem to be able to discover this secret readily. We can hear the definitions of the words. We can hear the descriptions of what these principles are, but in order to get their true meaning, we have to realize them, and this realization comes through our inner self. One way to describe it. I'm going to start with thought. The principles apply to all thinking beings. We use them from cradle to grave. Newborns have access to the three principles. Now, as regards thought, we all use what we'll term as our little mind, or our personal mind, through thought. From the time that we are born, we are trying to understand life. We're trying to survive. We are recording through our various senses all the inputs that we can to try and figure this game of life out. And so an infant will he'll hear himself crying, he'll hear himself or herself laughing, and we will be interacting with those that greet us. Basically, our parents, or the people who help us, who are there to love us and guide us. And we're constantly trying to figure out how this works. So we are loading ourselves up with inputs, data that is coming from the outside. And therefore it's, impossible almost not to think that what's going on outside and our attempt to manipulate the outside forces is the way that life works. And we do not understand that there is a greater forces, that there is an inside force. That inside force is our soul. And our soul has a connection to the energy of all things, the universal mind. So we have access to something that is not generated inside our mind, inside our little mind, but from inside our soul. That's a tough one for us to get together, because we feel we know better. We, we use cause and effect. We use our interactions with each other to try and figure out what is life? What are our goals of life? Who are we? Where do we come from? What happens to us when we leave? And that's the cradle, the cradle to the grave. And those are our universal questions. And basically, we have thought in our little mind, and we have the universal mind. So there's two of the three, and the one that seems to appear in the middle in most of these descriptions is consciousness. Consciousness is our awareness of these three principles. And the deeper we understand them, the more we grow in consciousness. So we get to the question of who are we and what are we doing here? Well, we are members of humanity. And what we are conscious of is a level of understanding of these principles. And where we're going is to the highest level of consciousness that we can reach within our lifetime. That's the secret. And when we hit the grave, we've reached that level of consciousness that we've reached during that lifetime. It's not over. We return. There's reincarnation. We come to live another life. And we continue living lifetime after lifetime, every lifetime growing in consciousness until we reach enlightenment, the knowing of all, the knowing of inside and out, the knowing of the form and the formless. It does not have to take many lifetimes. It can happen in 1 second. How do we make it happen? I don't know. Mr. Banks once said, whatever you think enlightenment is, it's wrong. And the way that you plan to get there, it'll be the opposite of what you should be doing, because you will be working from the middle mind when you do that. So basically, that's such a tough question. I don't know who can really answer that question except, enlightened beings, which I am not. I guess we're For what I've learned, growing in consciousness is akin to growing in our level of love, our level of love and understanding. Um, if there was a practice that you could do, then it would be listening to truth. The deeper truth that you can listen to, the deeper truth that you can hear, the closer you will come to higher consciousness. That is what will change our consciousness. Is it a technique? It's something that I've wondered about for decades. And I would say that it's being in the now, moment to moment, when you're exposing yourself to truth. And the listening is done in the strangest way. It's listening for a feeling. Now, how do you even know what that is? It's a matter of experiencing it. And what feeling are we listening for? I mean, we have all kinds of feelings. We're listening for love. That's what we're listening for. When we're looking at our understanding, it's understanding what is now, understanding what is present, understanding being in the now, being in the present, understanding that it's simplifying rather than complicating. And when you're in the world of language, which is removed from reality, as you simplify it down, you come down to one word: is. The word is. That's the word that's describing the now. And the highest level of what is love. Is love. When we realize that, we grow. And it's a matter then of how deep do you feel love, which is a never-ending journey. That was so hard to get to today when you asked me that question. Yeah. The feeling is coming. So as we go through our days, we just forget about all this stuff. And what I found helpful to remember is that if I can conduct myself, live in kindness, which is love. It's all the value of love: kindness, security, peace, caring. This I know applies to everyone. My personal experience of it is, I'm sure, the same as everyone's. When I'm when I'm in my kind place, my caring place, my place of liking, my place of understanding, my my place of oneness, my place of sharing. Then the other end of the spectrum, hate, anger, frustration, insecurity, fear, jealousy. There's no room for them when you're kind. The more love you feel, the more secure you are. The more understanding you are with everything in nature. The higher your consciousness is. So we're going for the deep question here, not the tiny problems, but no problems. Knowing we're responsible, not listening to the things that we fed into our biocomputer from day one that would separate us from each other and give the responsibility for our woes and for our good times to somebody else or to the outside world. But realize that we have access to mind, to universal mind, and all of the other terms that can be applied to that process that says we're all one. And that mind is everything. We're part of everything. Now, I hate to say that word God. I hesitate to say it, not I hate to say it. I hesitate to say it because it's just another word for mind, for universal mind. In other religions, Allah, as I understand it in the Muslim religion, it's another word for the same thing, universal mind. So this is everything. And when we talk about everything, there's nothing to separate from it. So we're talking about every human, first of all, every thinking being, but not only that, every cell in our bodies, everything, every object, every concrete object, everything that is there, it's all part of it. And beyond that, you can say it's everything on Earth, it's everybody in the planet, the billions of people in the planet, and the billions of cells in the planet. You can't, it's so vast, it's limitless. And then we get into the idea of form and formless. And it's everything in form and it's everything formless. That's what we're talking about. That's what I heard Mr. Banks talking about. And it's not I mean, I have to trust my reception of that explanation that he presented us. It's not just because he said it, it's because I hear it. Because everything is just a metaphor, and it has to be received by every individual within themselves to get that aha from it, to get that insight, their own insight. We all have to find our own insights. We all have to allow them to come to us. There's nothing, there's nothing we can do for it. The only thing that I can, this is how I live my life these days. And that is sharing my highest level of consciousness. Because doing that, I actually changed that level. I grow in consciousness. I grow in understanding. I grow in the sharing of love. So it seems, as I try to remember what I've just talked about, that I've been all over the place, and I've only just, let me say, I've just done my best to try to explain the unexplainable. And there's other ways to do it. But the real way is just to get that feeling. Live in that feeling, share that feeling. What is your impression of the three principles?
All right. Like my understanding has been quite good. Like I used to feel stressed, worried, depressed about things. And when I discovered about the three principles, I would often listen to Sydney Banks, and I would listen to him while sleeping. And in the morning, I would have, such amazing feelings. And without getting a single logic, I would feel so good and so happy, and life changed. But
Oh, nice.
yeah, but later on, I got into the logical part of these principles, and I felt worse. So I realized there's no description of the principles in logical words.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Whenever I put on a video of Sid's, whenever I listen to a tape, whenever I read one of his books, a page of one of his books, um, I feel elevated. I feel happier.
Wow.
I feel great. I feel grounded. It's is that a technique? The idea of technique, not technique. If you're opening up to truth, then you feel good. When you feel good, you've been growing.
Exactly.
That's how I play it anyway. How I play the game of life. Let's ask another question.
Yeah, yeah.
This is almost like the question that you would have at the end of the hour. But still, yes, now that we're where we are, with the feeling that we've got, is there another direction that we can take it?
Exactly. I'm very curious. So are the people. Like you are the original student of Sydney Banks. So how did you meet him? How did you meet Sydney Banks?
Sure. No, that statement I have to qualify. I am not the original student of Sydney Banks. I am one of them. If I were to say who is the original, I would have to say it's Barb Banks. His wife at the time was the first student of Sydney Banks.
Okay.
That's where he shared it right from the get-go, right in the moment, right as he, when he had his enlightenment experience, she was there, and so he began trying to explain it to her, and then also realizing, and that it was quite a shock for her to see this happening before her eyes. And so he paid loving attention to her, and helped her along with it. And she was incredibly, at first she thought it was very weird, and even described maybe he's having a nervous breakdown here. He's become so different within a matter of a minute. And the stuff that he was starting to come out with, stuff that he had seen, he was so excited. He realized wonderful things were in the future. And so he shared it with her, and she took not that long, actually. I think it was within a day or two that she actually had an insight about what he was sharing. And so there's the original student of Sydney Banks. And there were others, within that first year, during the first year after his experience, there were very few people that would give him the time of day. In fact, and people that knew him in the past couldn't handle it, or they didn't recognize him. He had changed so much, that type of thing. And Sid, to him, it seemed like what he had learned was so obvious that there would be, all he had to do was point it out. There's these three principles: mind, consciousness, and thought, and we use our thoughts, and we consciousness is our awareness of what we're doing, and mind is that universal space force that is involved in all of us. And part of the problem was that he was only a welder, and he carried that with him, and he had left school at 14, and that had been the dominant thing that he used in his own lost thinking prior to his experience to carry on his own insecurity. So he saw what he had been doing, and he took a look around, and he saw that everyone was doing it that way, and that nobody really knew what they were doing. They were blaming anything else outside and trying to react, So I can't make that claim. I can only say that I was there approximately a year later when he came to Salt Spring, and I met him. Probably within a week or two of him arriving on the island to live. They had come to a summer, their home had been the summer cottage. And so he had, now they had left Nanaimo, he had left his job, and his wife and kids, and he and grandma moved to Salt Spring. So, and grandma was also there. I would say she was more of a reluctant student at that time, but ultimately she did have many insights, and she changed, and she became a very loving example of people who had insights directly related to Sydney Banks. So there became a group of people after within a few months of his setting up on the island, and no longer being a welder, but being I would say I would call him a prophet, but whatever term that you want to use, because you start putting labels, and immediately people have an idea what that is. So, and their idea may not be receptive. But at any rate, my story, and I'll try to do it quick, not long. So I was on the ferry coming home late at night from Vancouver to Salt Spring. My wife and I had been growing apart. We were out of money. The cabin we were building was not yet finished, and so that was the kind of situation. And I had gone in to try and get some financing, and I had failed. So now I was on the boat, and I was very agitated is a good word, and I was walking the boat. So I had been doing this for 2 or 3 hours. The journey, late night boats stopping at other places and so on. It takes that long. It would have been at least a couple hours, and doing things like trying to make eye contact with other passengers as I passed them by over and over and over again. One end of the boat to the other. And anyway, this couple got on the boat at Main Island, and along with about 10 other people or so, 2 or 3 cars probably. And anyway, I walked into that lounge, and there they were sitting in the front row, new heads. I knew they were new. It was like fresh meat already. I'd walked that boat. I'd seen everyone. And I was curious because I saw something different. They stood out right there in the middle of it, and they were an ordinary couple, not fancy dressed, old leather jacket, jeans, simple. I saw love. They had their heads together, kind of. They were tired. It was, probably 11:30 at night, and but I picked it up right away, and I had to have a look. So I deliberately walked in front and walked across and had a look down at these 2 people that were tired out, but content and at peace. Almost, they almost had halos around them. They were so there was love. So I carried on my walk. I just had my look, and then I walked. But something had happened already. I sat down before I finished my next circuit. I found a place to sit, a place to rest. And, later, a couple of months later, or maybe more than once, Sid would say to me, "What did you hear that night? What did you, what was it?" Because he was curious as to the effect that he was having on people for his continued sharing. And I had, we had talked later on in the evening, in that night, because I had invited him up to my house. But my answer was, I don't know what was said, but I saw love. So that's why I'm so big on talking love. I was changed by love. It was not by words. The metaphor for me was a visual and a feeling that was radiating. And that's what I saw. Anyway, I got off the boat. I stuck out my thumb. It was the end of the parking lot. It was midnight, black. And the cars started coming out, and I was out there with my thumb out because I had no ride home. And an old pickup truck pulls over. Sit and bark. Open the door, get in. Where are you going? I told them, that's on our way. And how are you doing? And I spilled my guts. I told my sob story. Poor me, so on. Very kind, very loving, both of them. Listening, even though they were in that tired place. And when we got to my driveway, I insisted that they come in. And they did. They drove up to the top in the dark, got out, walked up these rickety stairs into our home. I got my wife out of bed, and we sat in semi-darkness talking for about 2 hours. And I could never tell you what we talked about. The word Satori came up. I had no idea what that word would relate to. Now I would have said that it relates to an enlightenment experience. Sid, I remember Sid saying, "Oh, and then there's levels of consciousness," and he said, "No, it's too soon for levels." And I remember my response, "No, it's not. Tell me, I can take it." What are levels? What is this levels? So anyway, that was that night. They were reaching out to us in a way, and it was you might say, under the guise of friendship. They were new to the island, and they were, Sid was really looking for some people to share with, but they were reaching out as friends. We were not saying, "Well, we got a lot of problems, and we'd love to hear your stuff." So we became friends. We went down to their place the next day, met their kids, brought our kids with us. They were very hospitable. Sid was in the middle of fixing the floor, leveling the floor in the cottage. He was a hands-on tradesman still yet, and loved doing that kind of thing and enjoying what he was doing. And then it started to grow from there. And he put an ad in the paper, and it was advertising for an awareness group, Friday nights. Anybody interested, here's a phone number, and it'll be conducted by someone who himself is enlightened. And that little ad generated a certain amount of interest, mostly, I might say, more negative than positive, but so what? So he held a kind of a meet and greet evening, and invited those people that had phoned and responded to the ad. And on top of that, there was us, and there was two other couples that we knew. One of them we didn't know. They had met Sid, similar to me, only not on the boat, but had gone down his driveway looking for him. They'd heard that there was a guy down there that might be able to help him. And so there was a Friday night group that formed. Now, this first night did not really go that well, I would say, but the people that had come and phoned and read the ad mostly were there to challenge. What makes you think you're enlightened? What gives you the right to make that statement? This and that. They were threatened. Anyway, the night ended, and as a result, there was Friday night meetings starting over at Sid and Barb's, and they weren't really meetings. They were just gathering together, and we would ask Sid questions, or Sid would start talking, and then we would ask questions. And they put the format of eventually of writing a book, a little book. So this was the first writing about Sid, and a lot of it was said in those Friday nights. So about 8 people. His brother-in-law and his wife came over every weekend, stayed with Sid and Barb, often bringing 4 children with them. But the children weren't in there, in this. So then there was us, and then there was this other couple that had gone down the driveway, and she was the person that was writing that book. And there was another couple who were friends of ours that lived in a teepee, a lawyer and his wife. and they had, given up on society and wanted to go back to the land, much as my wife and I had, and that's why we were on Salt Spring Island. So that's basically that phase of things. And then Sid started, a few months of this, the book was written. Sid branched out. He made his first public talk in Vancouver, and a lot of people responded to that, actually. And then there was other little baby steps that were happening in terms of putting it out. He and Barb went into the University of British Columbia, tried to reach psychologists there, and they were greeted well, and they were welcomed in. But they were really, they were polite and mildly interested in what he had to say, but he had no credentials. So it was not a major success that way. He wasn't just embraced and said, "Sure, come on in. We will. We're thrilled to have you here, and we want to learn everything you've got to share." But he had to start. He had to start somewhere, and that's what he did. And within the next year, he ended up with groups, small groups that were listening, in a way, mirrors of the Friday nights, only there was one in Nanaimo. There was one on Main Island with the brother-in-law. There was one in Vancouver with other people that appeared. There was one in Victoria. So it went out that way for a few months. And Sid would visit each one, a different one each weekend or something like this. And every time they were starting to tape, they would tape little tapes of what he shared in these places, not public talks particularly, but, and any public talks that he did after that, they started to happen, and they would be taped. And then these little groups would all have copies of the tape, and they could play that and, grow from it and be part of it. So that's how it started. And then it moved on to psychologists hearing about it, however they heard about it, and eventually checking it out, showing up, and seeing that the people there had actually changed already. And it was similar to their clients who hadn't really changed because of the techniques that they were using, because the psychologists themselves needed to understand, needed to have insight in order for it to really work. And so these things started to happen. And it's grown to where it is today, which is a phenomenal thing. But it's just still in some ways only baby steps. The number of psychologists in the world, the number of psychology departments in universities there are in the world, basing their training primarily on Freudian techniques still, which don't work. They don't stop the suffering. They may alleviate it on a temporary basis until next session. And yeah. So
Beautiful. Beautiful. I want to ask you, what was the first book that you were talking about that Sydney wrote?
Well, he didn't. He's not the author of the book, but he wrote it. At that time, Sid. These are big steps for a welder who left school at 14 to, even though he had experienced what he experienced, to just, pick it up and start writing. Mm-hmm. So it was Island of Knowledge is the name of the first book. I don't know. I believe it is available these days. It's not really it's not on the psychological level, which is where Sid's um, prime, you know, approach was directed. It was more on the spiritual level, and it was, you know, it didn't have a big impact on psychology. Put it that way. So as the psychologists arrived, Sid's emphasis became, this is what he was waiting for. Um, his mandate from his experience was quite clear that he was destined to help alleviate human suffering, and the suffering that he narrowed in on was psychology. All the people, and I mean, the world's in, you might say, an epidemic of depression and psychological problems today, just as it was then, but it seems to have intensified more since then, as far as I can see anyway. So there's a dire need for the raising of the level of consciousness of humanity on an individual by individual basis, because that's the only way it can go. You just can't give them a pill that says, here it is, take this and it'll all be okay. Or listen to this and it'll all be okay. You've got to hear it. You've got to feel it. And so that's, it seems like another common sense thing is work with children. They've had less time to prove that it doesn't work, kind of thing, to prove that it's the outside world that, how do I, as we grow up, it's, damn it, if that guy didn't do that, or if my boss would have only been better, or if my teachers would have been, all of that, rather than understanding. When you look at young children, babies, and that, they're great examples of less contaminated thinking.
Exactly.
So if you can,
all right, yeah,
common sense seems to me that if you can nurture that and nourish that, and you don't have to be talking about three principles. You talk about insight, allow them to become aware of the inner voice, that voice inside. We all know the difference between right and wrong. That comes from insight. I want to go back to talking about love some more now.
sure.
And the love that I want to talk about, unconditional love, not conditional love, not, I don't love her anymore because she did that, or I really love her because she does this, or him, or my kids, or whatever. Not conditions. And the love that you create as a gift to yourself, because you want to be living in love, and you don't have to have an outside reason to do this. You just feel it, know it, practice it. recently, you know, my fiance and I are to be married in about 2 months. And so the idea of we're going to play some music. It's an outdoor wedding, but we got a PA system. And we want to play some music. What songs are we going to play? And there's been, you know, a number of different songs, but this one song that we were checking out that we love, and partly because back in those days, quite often there was singing, you know, after a talk or a gathering together. And one of our favorite performers was a guy named John Denver. I don't know whether you've ever heard of John Denver. He's not around anymore, but he wrote some beautiful songs. And so I went on YouTube and I had not heard this song really. I must have, but I don't follow music all that amount. But it's called what's it called? I keep forgetting the name. Perhaps Love. So what's beautiful about it, I went on YouTube and I popped this thing up, and he had it's on. There's about 6 or 8 different recordings of it that he did. He did it with an opera singer, you know, as well. But he's more of a rock and roll type. And I watched him for the performance that he did of this song in England, in London. And I think it was 1982 or something. And he started talking to the audience, and you know, how they do. I wrote this song, you know, so and so, and he said, you know, I had nothing to do with it. I just like wrote it down. You know, it was a gift, and perhaps love. And he was driving down the highway in California when it came to him, and you know, it was, you know, a beautiful experience. And he was writing it, as he said to the crowd, I wrote it for you. Because you're there, because you're listening, because you want to hear it. And it's not conditional love, it's unconditional love he's talking about. And he along that vein, he talked about his father passing away just, you know, 6 months or so before that song. And he was it was one of his worst times, full of grief, and he had received letters of condolence from all around the world. Not people he knew, people who knew about him and reached out to him and wrote him this beautiful thing. And it really touched him, and it really helped him. And he was grateful for that unconditional love that was coming from people who expected no response or anything else. They just gave it to him unconditionally. And so there it is, perhaps love. It was great to see somebody who was not into 3 principles particularly, but was into unconditional love, and had written this and dedicated, and he thanked them. He says, it's for you. I've written it for you. I've written it for every one of you. My gift to you. I love that. Unconditional love. It's that feeling. It's that beautiful feeling that we give ourselves. We're in the feeling of love, not for any bargains. We're in the feeling of love because that is it. That is the answer. That is our highest level of consciousness. And it's never ending. it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And then it goes deeper. And that's really all we have to know. All we have to know to accomplish our purpose in life. That's the reason we're here. How simple, how wonderful to live in love. That's what the three principles are all about. You boil the three principles down, and what you're left with is that the answer is love, unconditional love. Love you, give yourself. You don't have to have any reason for it. Make up your reason if you want to, but not a conditional reason. It's a feeling that you want. That great feeling that you had when you were talking about playing Sid while you slept and you woke up with that wonderful feeling. That's love.
Wow.
And we hide from love. It's a disgrace. We never want it. It's seen as a weak thing. It's the most powerful thing there is. It's not a weakness. It's not a weakness to say to somebody, I love you, because they might reject your love. It's your love. Reject or nay is not the reason. I love you. I love you. I have the feeling of love. I can, it's just a beautiful feeling. It's just the most beautiful feeling. It is the ultimate feeling. It's really the thing that I love talking about the most, the thing that I share the most, the thing that but it's not me. I'm just a speck. But if we're in anything lesser, we're just being silly. As we have nothing to do to have that feeling, except allow it and share it. That's our part, is to share it. Then you start to enjoy everything. When you asked me to explain the three principles, I was floored. What is it? Nobody can explain the three principles, to be honest. Who can explain consciousness? Who can explain thought? Come on, who can explain mind of all things? I love trying to explain mind, but I love it. Actually, this is the gift we're given. This is how humanity works. But as far as getting our little mind around it all, yeah. But certainly it's important.
So, as far as I'm understanding, these principles are sharing about what you have not about describing them in words. Is it
I,
so?
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. You know, I think we both had this in mind,
Mhm.
that we, as we have our conversation, we we want the feeling. We want to share beautiful feelings. You and me want to share a beautiful feeling together.
Exactly.
That's that's the purpose of our conversation. And you know, on looking at that, I'd say, good job. We've got a great feeling. Um, I, I love the opportunity. I was starting to spin my wheels there, but so what? I am a human. I'm not a god. Um, you too, but we're doing this so that it might help people. We're demonstrating the feeling being created. Of course, it's the viewers that have to do it for themselves. But you and I are on the screen, and it's a lot like John Denver. Um, we love humanity, and we're doing it for them, for all of us. I shouldn't separate us so far from them, for all of us. Um, if we weren't aware that there were unseen potential humans that had taken a look at this, if they give us a chance, um, we love them, and we love them for the opportunity of the potential of this going out. Much as a writer, writes a book and he doesn't know who's going to read it. He or she doesn't know who's going to read it. But, without that visualization of a reader, um, you know, I mean, we love our readers. We love our viewers. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. And, so the gratitude comes in. That's two other uh, beautiful factors that go along with this understanding, and that is gratitude and forgiveness, humility. There's whole other vistas that come and that arise when we're acknowledging gratitude, when we're acknowledging forgiveness of others and ourselves, and experiencing humility, which is a retraction of ego. Opens up a space that gets filled with love.
Would you talk more about the wisdom, like how it is guiding us?
Well, wisdom is another name for mind,
Okay.
and it is, mind, and or the word wisdom, or the other words that I gave that we shy away from.
Mhm.
um, we have this consciousness part of us, this soul part of us, that is directly, if we remove our thinking, we get to the conduit that takes us to wisdom. So something that I've been learning primarily in the past year, actually, accessing wisdom generally comes through an insight.
Insight.
Yeah, a sight from within. But during this conversation, there's been times when the question has come and I'm searching for what to say. And that's a practice that, we all could appreciate. Go to your, silence your mind.
Wow.
Don't do a knee jerk on the first thing that comes, so that you can, spar, or, come up with a glib remark so that you can get past that one, so you can get something else going. And I really, it's something that I have started to do on a much more regular basis, because of the opportunity that I've had this last year in Heartfelt Presence, talking about these various things to people, answering questions or comments, and not jumping to the first quick answer, but stopping, trying to, not even thinking I got to slow my mind down, just doing it and trusting. And sometimes, you don't have anything. You're going to say, I don't get that right now. I don't have that answer right now. I'm going to have to let that percolate for a while. But that's, I feel that when I do that, I'm opening the conduit for wisdom, for the right answer to come, the answer that I haven't got it inside up here somewhere. It's in the moment, quiet down, see what happens, and you come out with, more. The more you try it, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. It's not necessarily going to come any faster, but you're allowing yourself not to panic and not to prove. And when I watch this again, I will wonder. I don't want to be judging myself too much, but I do want to get better. So there might be times when I look at it and say, "Oh, why don't you just take a little longer and let the answer come?" Especially on the very first question.
Beautiful.
But so that's really all I know about it. Cindy used to do it. I didn't necessarily notice him doing it, but now I look back and I see that he teaches it in his writing. Almost every character, he has characters in all his books, the ones that have characters. Missing Link does not, but the rest, there's always a person of wisdom as part of the story, and that person gets asked questions, and Sid includes in his description how that person stopped for a minute, took a pause, waited, and then answered. And that's, and there are other people within, this field that I respect highly, and I noticed that is one of the things that they're sharing is take a moment, let your mind clear. And I know when I'm working in the heartfelt room, without even having a question, regularly Roz and I will suggest, let's have a couple of minutes silence together.
Wow.
And so we do. And sometimes it's longer than a couple of minutes. And the response of people in the room has been very supportive. They love it. And then during that quiet time, you know, what we'll say is, if something comes to you, bring it up.
Okay.
And, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, there are certain things that come to me to share, because we have time to share, and our mandate in that situation is to have conversations. And we don't just jump to the 3 principles particularly. It might be something that's going on that happened earlier in the day that you want to share, but you see it and share it in terms of 3 principles. So that's, you know, I think that I like that advice. I use it myself,
Wow.
and you get better at it. It's like an insight,
So,
tiny little insight, you know, but they can be any size.
mhm.
You know, they come in big and middle sizes. But that, yeah, wisdom, that's it. Wisdom is accessing mind. Mind holds the wisdom. Or another way is, if it's a problem that you want to solve, or a choice that you need to make, and you're agitated, or your mind won't stop analyzing and saying, I'm going to write all these things down, positive, and all these things, you know, pro or anti, or pro or that, to solve the problem. And really, it's go to your happy place. Leave it alone. Don't try to answer it. Trust that you'll do the right thing, that the answer will come to you and it'll be clear. And do something you enjoy.
Wow.
Let it go. Do something you enjoy. That's where they say go for a walk in the woods, or play a game of tennis, or if you're with somebody, share in a different way, you know, lighten up, be together. It's more important. In the now is more important than that future choice, or the regrets that you have for that other choice. And that you just let those all go. And then your problems are gone.
Wow.
It becomes easy. You wonder, well, what was I so worried about that for? You just have to trust your inner voice. So practicing that, giving yourself a chance to allow your inner voice to come and give you the answers you need. And it goes for psychologists, which I'm not. So I have maybe no business to say, here's how you do it. But it seems to me the practice of the good 3P coaches is to share with their client and get a good rapport, build trust, and the problems that they think they have go away.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So are we about time to wind up?
Yeah, exactly. It's been almost like 1.5 hours.
Sure.
All right. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity.
It's my pleasure and my honor to
Oh,
be with you.
oh, that's you know, far beyond what I need. But thank you for those words. But it's been an honor to be with you too, Curran. I think you're a great guy.
Thank you. So are you.
No, no. If you only knew.
Beautiful.
I hope it helps people. You know, it's a great um, opening act kind of deal for me.
Wow.
The beginning of sharing in this way.
Well, it was amazing, very much insightful. After talking to you, I feel lighter, better, and happier.
Oh, and I feel the same with talking to you. And to everybody out there, you know, I hope this is helpful.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, James, thank you very much. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Take care.